Welcome to the CatholicPsych Show. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Stephanie Muncy, not Dr. Greg Bottaro. He's still touring the United States, shirking in his responsibilities. We had Jack Beers earlier this week, and Stephanie is subbing in today. We get the perspective of the feminine genius. Are you excited?
Very, absolutely.
Great. So let's tell people what we're going to talk about. I've tried to avoid, like the plague, the topic of former President Donald J. Trump, but we can't avoid it today.
And
we got some big news.
Like I'm like conflict averse, and like Jack gets to talk about basketball, right? Like sports. I don't even know. And this is Stephanie, baptism by fire.
You drew the short straw. We're inevitably going to upset people today, and it's okay. It's what we're working with. And then we're going to talk about Star Wars. We're going to talk about identity politics and Star Wars if we can get to it. If Trump doesn't take an hour, I'm sure people will be in the chat. Welcome everyone in the chat. And please come to us with questions. This is the CatholicPsych Show. We are going to be responding to news and interacting with you. So let's start with what has actually happened. He has his hush money trial, and it came to a conclusion. And he has been found guilty on 34 accounts. So let me give the official read on Trump here. So, wait. Okay, here we are. Donald Trump became the first U.S. president to be convicted of a crime on Thursday, when a New York jury found him guilty of falsifying documents to cover up payment to silence a porn star ahead of the 2016 election. After deliberations of over 2 days, the 12-member jury announced it had found Trump guilty on 34 accounts he faced. Unanimity was required for any verdict. So he's guilty.
He is.
He's guilty. Now, I don't know about your political opinions and leanings. I know that you're Catholic, so your moral system lines up with the Catholic churches. But I think that the few times that I've heard you get a little political, I've actually heard a little bit of left leaning in the way you look at things. You're anti-imperialism. You focus on structural inequality. What's your first reaction to all this with Trump? How do you feel about Trump? Where are you at with this?
Oh, wow.
Do you like Trump?
Right there. Wow.
Yeah.
You asked me if I like Trump.
Yes.
That was the direct question.
Yes.
I do not like Trump.
Okay, why don't you like Trump?
So, and here's the thing, like, I have a lot of respect for the different reasons people will vote the way that they will vote. And like, for me, I can't reconcile what I know, at least what I know, and I don't think everything I know from the media is accurate, but I can't reconcile what I know of him personally to be somebody that I want to be, in leadership. I don't trust the motivations for his desire to be the president. And it really upsets me. It feels like a manipulation of Christianity and the use of the church, all for his own gain.
Okay. I think there are a lot of conservatives that do feel that way, that do not like Trump, but are left with the decision of Trump versus Biden.
Yeah.
And
so about politics, it feels like it's choosing between like why do I have to choose between two things I don't want to choose between?
I think that's very common. Somebody was saying to me today, Trump versus Biden is the season 2 that nobody wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot here. The trial itself, the interesting thing to me about the trial is people are reacting to the verdict of the trial and sort of ignoring the morality that's implied by the verdict, which is that he cheated on his wife with a porn star. As a woman, you can't be excited about that. I mean, I think he denies that he did.
I'm sure he
did. There is a history of him being a little bit misogynistic.
There seems to be a lot of evidence of that, whether or not this actual experience is legitimate. Like, I think that seems hard to deny in general.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tough nowadays to follow any kind of political leaders and trust that any of them are living a sound moral life. There's so much here. So there's a possibility that he goes to prison.
Yeah.
This was raised to the level of from a misdemeanor because of his role in affecting politics. People are reacting all over the place. Trump's fixer Michael Cohen testified that Trump approved a $130,000 hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, that's the porn star, in the final weeks of the 2016 election when he faced multiple accusations of sexual misbehavior. Right. So falsifying business documents is normally a misdemeanor in New York, but prosecutors in Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office elevated it to a felony on grounds that Trump was concealing an illegal campaign contribution. So the idea is that this would normally be a misdemeanor. It's been elevated to a felony. He could serve up to 4 years in prison while he may be running for president.
Which he still can from jail, correct?
He can correct. He can still run for
If he
president,
goes.
which is amazing. I don't know if he gets arrested and goes to prison, how he's going to run the country. It's almost like we're voting for a vice president, or maybe there'll be a fine. Maybe it'll be house arrest. I still don't know how he could be the leader of the free world like under house arrest. So I think there's concern that he's not going to be able to campaign, and this might mean that he loses the election against Biden.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Biden? You like Biden?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Here's the thing, like, maybe it's helpful if I explain a little of my history. Like, when I was a Protestant, I was and my psychology is reflective in this, because I was like, it was attractive to me that there were Christians that were anarchists, which I don't think actually works. But to me, but the thing is that because God is, king, right? Because he is like first and foremost our leader. And so that, but like, as Catholics, the both and, we know we need both. But I think that because to me, like, the avoidant parts of me find it hard to be like, how could I don't trust what I'm hearing in the media. And it's not that I think nothing I'm hearing is true, but it's hard to like parse out what is and what isn't. And it's hard to like you're saying, like, there are all these leaders that it's like, it's hard to find somebody that really feels like is trustworthy. And so to me, it feels like, I'm tempted to apathy, like that's my temptation, is just to
that's the danger, right? To not care about politics and just focus entirely on like questions of faith. Well, I mean, politics affect our lives. So how do you think Catholics are, like, how do you think we're supposed to make sense of something like this? Like, how are we supposed to make sense of voting for someone who promotes values that line up with a Catholic worldview, who is now technically a convicted felon? I mean, he's going to appeal. A lot of conservatives are saying that the trial was ridiculous, and that it was politically driven. But this is who we're chosen. Like, we have to vote probably between one of these two people. Some people may abstain from voting, but they may vote for a third party. But this is the choice. I mean, I have myself. I've voted along the issues that are most important to me as a Catholic. I mean, he has put into place pro-life policies, and that is a crucial issue. But I've also had friends who are more liberal or Democrats that can't believe that I would vote for someone based on just that one issue alone. Like the prominence and importance we place on the issue of abortion as Catholics, and like we're ignoring all these other qualities that Trump maintains. He's supposedly misogynistic, and he's racist, and he's all these sorts of problems with Trump. So it's tough. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? What else can we do besides vote with our conscience?
I mean, for me, I think, it went from like, as I grew, as a Catholic, of like, and just grew in my faith in general before I even converted, from apathy to feeling like I was responsible to make a decision and vote. And I think that, like, I could know, like, I think that some people do choose to abstain, and like, I think it is a personal decision, but I think, I can't reconcile all the ways in which, like, absolutely, I'm like absolutely pro-life, but also like I care about the lives of other people too that aren't being taken care of,
Sure.
And so like, I think that like as Catholics, why do we like, why can't we be consistently pro-life? And why do we have to settle? You know, for me, like, it's really hard for me to compromise, to feel like, you know, so this is so funny to say on the internet. Also, I've never even been on a podcast. And so like, here I am on the internet saying, I don't like Trump. You're putting me in this position. Thanks a lot. And, and like, so like, I, you know, like most recently, like I voted, you know, for just candidates that I felt more comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I appreciate being on the show. I know it's a lot your first time coming on. And on a very difficult day. I mean, hopefully you'll have some relief when we talk about Star Wars. So we have some comments in the chat. J&J ABMV, Clinton cheated and Kennedy cheated. So it's this person is normalizing the infidelity of presidents. I mean, I don't think that makes it okay. Can we separate someone's moral fiber from the decisions they're making in terms of what is best for the country? It's tough to do, but we may not have a choice. Mm-hmm. Jeff Chase says, Stephanie, he's talking to you directly. Stephanie, it's okay to not like Trump. With the Catholic viewpoint, it's very difficult to like him. Yeah. My wife and mom can't stand him, primarily based on his poor behavior. Yeah, I think women have a hard time with him. Mm-hmm. But he was a good president. Yeah. I think as in terms of what we do, we can see some personality defenses.
Yeah.
That are present within mm-hmm. Trump's presentation. What do you think? What do you think are some, like, not that we're diagnosing him, but just kind of like our armchair kind of conceptualization? What do you pick up on him in terms of like what he exhibits?
I mean, it seems like he has some strong narcissistic defenses. And so, you know, like, I think not taking responsibility for certain things personally, you know, the desire for, you know, everything that he's gained, you know, I think the grandiosity, I think I definitely see that. What about you?
Yes, the grandiosity is big. The illusions of grandeur. I'm trying to find the quote that he had afterwards. Our country, a shell-shocked Trump spoke after the verdict saying, "I'm an innocent man. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. This was done by the Biden administration in order to hurt a political opponent. It's a disgrace, and we'll keep fighting. Our country has gone to hell. We're a nation in decline. This was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who never should have been allowed to judge the case. The real verdict is in November." And there's something true about that, right? The Constitution does not stop candidates in running for president while serving jail time. It's been done before. He can still run for president behind bars. Interestingly, Biden tweeted right after the verdict.
Yeah. And
he said the only way to keep Trump out of office is by voting. This is the thing about Trump. The guy doesn't stop. He mm-hmm. just keeps coming. As long as he's been in the public political space, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that this is the end of Trump. Right? Like this is the end. This is it. This is the information that will make people not like him. I don't think this is going to do anything in terms of people. Like, people have their opinions already fixed on Trump. And I don't, like, even if he's in prison, the Biden camp knows, like, that this doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
He's still going to come after the presidency. And then we also have people reacting on either side, the world of celebrities. I find it so interesting that Caitlyn Jenner is so supportive of Donald Trump.
I actually did a double take when I read that. I was like, wait, am I getting this right?
Yeah, Caitlyn Jenner, an outrageous day for America. The entire process has been outrageous. Of course, shame on the state of New York, shame on the corrupt Department of Justice, Jenner said on X. I mean, a lot of what divides people politically right now are identity politics and trans issues and things like that. Caitlyn Jenner, of course, used to be Bruce Jenner, right, and is in complete support of Donald Trump.
Very surprising.
I would love to sit down and have a conversation,
right,
with Caitlyn Jenner. And then the other sort of extreme on the other side in favor of the verdict is Kathy Griffin, rejoicing over today's historic conviction of former President Donald Trump on 34 felony accounts. She responded in a tweet targeted at Trump, saying that she's crying tears of joy in response to the verdict. Now, if you go back a couple years, she got in a lot of trouble for holding up a head of Trump, a decapitated head with ketchup on it.
Yeah.
And she's talking about how President Trump like ruined her life. And this is vindication for how terrible he is. But I mean, you know, she put a decapitated head of the president
Yeah.
on live television. Like, what did you think was going to happen? Jeff Chase speaking again. You can't go bankrupt multiple times, come out being a billionaire without tenacity and some very strong personality characteristics. This is true oftentimes with these billionaires. I worked with a client one time that said, if I lost all my money, I could get it all back in a year. Like,
Wow.
not only does it take like, internal sort of, like you said, tenacity or resiliency to kind of come back through difficulty. But it takes tremendous business acumen too. I mean, he certainly has that.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people point to the decline in the economy as a result of President Biden and that we were flourishing under Trump. Now, a lot of people will push back on that. Like, we'll say that there's a lag, in the policies and the effect on the economy. But people generally trust Trump, at least from a conservative side, in terms of what he's able to do with the economy.
Yeah.
And they trust him on the world stage too.
Mm-hmm.
The world is generally much more frightened of Trump than it is Biden. And so the United States feels more impactful in terms of its influence on geopolitical issues than it does under Biden, who is argued as making concession after concession after concession.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've done some world travel. You spent some time in Uganda. You spent some time in Africa.
Yeah.
What is the perspective on American foreign policy? Do you think any of this matters in terms of how we are perceived, in terms of who's president from the rest of the world?
1,000% more than I think most people realize. And so this is really probably what motivated me to even take any interest, was because spending time in a few different countries in Africa, I'd never been out of the country before I was 21. I didn't travel growing up, wasn't exposed. People traveled a lot. And so just didn't realize the perspective of people and just how much eyes are on us, and how many assumptions there are based on the media and what people are perceiving. And for me, the most heartbreaking thing is that, people that I met, who were faithful Christians, really had this unfortunate experience and perspective that somehow I'm not saying everybody, but it was common enough that it was, a theme that people felt like Americans were blessed and Africans were cursed. I'm way oversimplifying it, but I think
spiritually.
Yeah. I think the consequences of colonialism and the way that America presents itself at times, I don't hate America, but I think that we need to be
that's good.
conscious. I know that's a strong statement, but I think that it's really risky, the place that America has in our lives, especially as Catholics, is who really is our king? What is the order here? Are things rightly ordered? Because I think sometimes we don't realize the way that the way we were brought up or the way that our priorities are, that it can seem America is the be all and end all when God loves every single other person in every other country.
Yeah, I think some of that's the education we had. I think, at least when I was going through school, elementary school, in the early formative years, patriotism was shoved down my throat.
Yeah.
Our view of history wasn't the most accurate at all, in terms of the terrible things the United States has done. I mean, certainly the United States has done wonderful, wonderful things. And it is the land of, I mean, there's inequality here. Of course, there's structural inequality, but I mean, there's very few places. I mean, I don't think there's any place in the world where there's the same opportunity that exists in the United States. And it's a wonderful place, and people are still flocking to come here. We have people flocking to the southern border for a reason.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful place. But growing up, there's a sense of disillusionment that I feel with the United States, and more and more of a separation between my Catholic identity and my identity as an American. I think the other difficult thing about being American is we're a young country. We're only a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
We don't have thousands of years of tradition where there's this deep kind of pride in our land and our people. Our people are still changing in terms of what it means to be American. And I had a conversation with a former Polish history professor, and he was talking about how he identifies as a Pole.
Mhm.
And when he visits, I mean, he's American, but I mean, he's an American citizen, but when he goes to Poland, he feels like he's home.
Mhm.
It's like there's like a longing and a longing for home and the homeland and the motherland and a nostalgia. The United States, like we can't even band together around ethnic identity. We don't even look alike. We have this kind of multiculturalism. We're trying to make it all work, but it can make us separate from what it means to be American. Not everyone has the same level of patriotism here.
Mhm.
And when Trump says "Make America Great Again," that means different things to different people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I do think we're in decline. I do think there was more of a golden age of the United States, but it doesn't mean that other people weren't wounded through that golden age at the same time.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and like and I could clarify, and I feel like maybe you're overcompensating a bit for my saying I don't hate America. Like I said that to be clear, that I'm not, that I'm not putting America down. And I think something
Sure.
that I couldn't see until I spent time in other places was when I lived in Rwanda and I was working and living with people who worked for reconciliation after the genocide there. They were blown away that, just like you're saying, so many different people from different places could all exist in the same place, for the most part peacefully. Not saying it's perfectly peaceful. And
Sure.
like, and like I never really thought about that, like, for a young country, and for as many different types of people are like, it's incredibly diverse for, like many
Yeah.
countries aren't, as
Right.
diverse.
Relative to the rest of the world, we get
Yes.
along peacefully. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, there's incredible racial and social tensions that exist in the
Absolutely.
United States, but we're not like literally killing each other at the moment.
At the moment.
I mean, that's not true. I mean, there is some crime and there's some
Yeah.
violence that exists in the United States for sure, but not a collective conscious war between sides within a nation,
Right. And so
which is
this is
what you
also,
experienced.
I'm talking about in the comparison with, Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda, where it's, and it's
Yeah.
Rwanda is like, I think the size of Maryland, if that, it's a really small country and it's got two main people groups and a smaller third one. So like, right. Like, so like, I think that for Rwandans, it was, my family, my host family was in awe, of like how we could all get along as well as we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the big takeaway today is we have to follow our conscience and follow our faith.
Mm.
And I think when it comes down to voting, this is not going to have very much impact on the vote at all. I wonder on the vote itself. I wonder what the implications of it are in terms of the sentencing, which happens in July, and
Mhm.
to what extent it'll affect his campaigning, but also like what it would mean if he's actually sentenced to prison time. Like, what does that mean practically, logistically?
Yeah.
I think his choice of running mate is going to be really important for the election. I think that's huge. But I think Trump is resilient. He keeps coming, and this isn't going to do much. He's going to find a way to poke holes in it. People already do. They have
Yeah.
they have such a deep allegiance to Trump as a person. They don't.
Mhm.
They're willing to overlook some of his faults, talk about his humanity and his shortcomings, point to the fact that we all have them, and yeah, it's going to be a question of just the majority vote. I think it's going to come down to the majority vote. It's always amazing to me to talk with people on both sides of the political spectrum, and how villainous Trump feels to the left,
Mhm.
and vice versa. How villainous Biden feels to the right, and not only that, how old Biden appears to the right, and
Mm.
all the sound clips and the sound bites and all of him falling down and him sort of slurring his words and him not knowing where he's going and
Mm.
walking away from the podium and his age, and you compare that to Trump and the vibrancy. But then we have liberals, Democrats that are saying things are like way overblown in terms of Biden's
Mhm.
health. And I don't know. This debate is going to be pretty interesting between the two of them.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have Jeff also says, no matter what the sentence is, it will go through appeal, which will take a long time and likely end up in front of a conservative judge. So, okay. So maybe this isn't very big news. It's something. It's part of the news cycle. It gives people something to talk about. But in terms of what's going to happen, maybe not much.
like I'm thinking of Downton Abbey, and like spoiler alert if you haven't seen Downton Abbey, but like Mr. Bates being on trial, like the day that it's announced, like, and like, it's never like, it's rarely, I feel like, actually what it is on that day. So I feel like things always change.
It's true. I mean, our court system, our legal system is crazy. Everything takes way longer than you expect. Most of the time, people don't want to get to trial. There's a significant amount of corruption. I don't think she would mind me telling the story, but when I was in Colorado with my wife, Teresa, she had some parking tickets and speeding tickets, and she forgot her insurance one time, and she had some court dates, and she was a little disheveled, and she missed some court dates. And long story short,
we also, I think she also would appreciate that we say, like, I think it's public. She has ADHD, so there's a very understandable reason for all of this.
Yes. I love my wife, and she's great. But the point is, when she went to court, we finally got to court after all these mishaps. She was facing jail time, according to Colorado law,
right?
Colorado traffic law. And I mean, it was a frightening experience. I mean, we had prison inmates being paraded into the courtroom in the orange jumpsuits and wearing handcuffs, and we were really scared about what was going to happen. But we paid a lawyer. We paid a good lawyer.
Yeah.
And she walked up to the bench, and she talked to the state prosecutor, and then they talked to the judge, and they worked out a plea, and it went from like possible jail time to her like us owing $200 in a fine. All the points had been lowered. So like, obviously it worked out in our favor, but a part of me was like, wow, this system is pretty corrupt. It's not justice is not always served, so we'll see what happens with the trial. All right. Anything else you want to say about Trump?
Well,
or Teresa?
I had competing thoughts. Yeah. Teresa, Ryan Nash, who thinks we are what makes America great. Thank you, Ryan Nash.
Appreciate it, Ryan.
Friend there. I think that I was curious, like, had Teresa known that she had ADHD, then had she had an official diagnosis, how that might have impacted things. Like, I'm just curious.
Like pleading insanity? Like, I don't know. I don't know if she could have gotten away with that. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that the whole thing is behind us now.
Anyone who knows Teresa knows she was not just like it was a legitimate ADHD experience.
Oh yes, it was. Yes, there was definitely a limitation on her capacity to be organized around making sure everything was in order. But we gotta compensate for our deficits sometimes, so we don't go to prison, or we hire a good lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's shift to Star Wars. Are you ready to be done with Trump? We get back into your wheelhouse a little bit more, which is great because you have 2 hamsters.
I do not have hamsters.
You have 2 guinea pigs.
And I can't believe you're talking about this on air live, and I can't stop you.
This is really important. What are the names? No, this is a great lead-in. This is a great preamble. What are the names of your guinea pigs?
Chewbacca and R2-D2.
Why are they named that?
So I waited a little bit to name them, to get to know them. And so I didn't know this. I'd never owned guinea pigs before. I also would like to say that my guinea pigs are teddy guinea pigs. They're very fluffy, very cute, not what you might think of when you think of guinea pigs. And they squeal, like they squeak, like they kind of whistle like R2-D2. And they also like kind of do this rumbling growl like Chewbacca. And so that's how I selected their names.
Yes. Okay. So, but you are a Star Wars fan.
I do love Star Wars. Yeah.
Which is great. And I'm very fascinated to hear your opinion on this. So there's a new show coming out next week on Disney Plus called The Acolyte. And it has been criticized by some people as being agenda driven and in terms of pushing forward female characters. And some call it the woke-alite instead of the acolyte, right? The people are playing off it. And a lot of people place a lot of blame on Kathleen Kennedy, who took over the helm at Disney once Star Wars was purchased from Lucas film.
Mhm.
And George Lucas was ousted, and Kathleen Kennedy's been at the helm ever since. And people have criticized her as being a strong feminist and pushing uh, 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 feminist agenda, um, and and even sort of like homosexual agenda within smaller corners of the Star Wars universe, books and things like that. Um, so she offered some commentary on this. So the Acolyte is set to make its premiere next week. Kathleen Kennedy has a take on why female characters haven't been working in the new Disney Star Wars era. Kennedy puts the blame on toxic male fans. You are
Mhm.
not a toxic male fan. You might be toxic, but you're not a male fan
Mhm.
of Star Wars who allegedly unleashed personal attacks on the actresses playing female characters. However, fans replied to Kennedy's accusation, sharing that Disney's fans have failed to create a single likable female character. Now, let's just start basic here.
Yeah.
Have you liked any of the Star Wars that has come out since Disney has purchased it? Did you like the last 3 movies?
Great.
Do you feel this agenda pushing? Do you notice it?
So here's the thing. I will pull the potential hipster card and say that like I loved Star Wars and it was not cool when I was in middle school. And so like the
Okay.
original trilogy is my first love. I
Mhm.
cannot stand the prequels. I think the sequels are enjoyable, but nothing competes with the original trilogy for me. The best
Okay.
thing I think that I've seen of Star Wars since the original trilogy is The Mandalorian. And I haven't kept up with all of the shows since then, but I think the shows definitely are better than the movies subsequently. I definitely think they're more engaging and higher
Than the
quality.
new movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I wouldn't say that I was paying close enough attention to realize any kind of agenda, but like also, can you catch me up? Do you know like the whole transition between Lucas and Kennedy? Like, I don't know that much about that.
Disney just bought it. They just
Okay.
bought Star Wars from George Lucas. He wasn't going to make any more films. So
Okay.
Disney purchased it. I think it was for $4 billion at the time, which was a tremendous amount of money. And then they had complete creative control, and there's a whole extended universe that they basically cut out. Those are referred to as legend books and all this stuff, and so that allowed more creative freedom moving forward.
Mhm.
Since that time, there hasn't been there hasn't been a lot of Star Wars that's been well received in the same way the original trilogy was. And in fact, people are appreciating the prequels more so compared to the sequels that have come out, 7, 8, 9
I'm
since that time.
surprised by that.
Yeah. Well, those were at least done by George Lucas.
Yes.
So there has been, I wrote a blog for Catholic Psych many years ago. You could probably still find it, where after I had saw episode 7,
Mhm.
right? So this was the latest trilogy. The first movie that came after the original trilogy, the last one was Return of the Jedi. The first one was The Force Awakens. And I made this argument in this blog, which I got eviscerated for,
Really?
almost canceled. Yeah. Was that I don't have a problem with strong female characters. I think they're great. I have no issue whatsoever.
Mhm.
But what occurred in that film, in my opinion, was a strong female character, which by the way didn't have any flaws. This
Mm.
character of Rey. So there's no character development. There wasn't
Mhm.
great storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, and you see traces of this with a lot of female characters in the franchise nowadays.
Mhm.
But all the men and beloved characters, male characters,
Right.
were denigrated.
Mhm.
Han Solo is this deadbeat dad,
Yeah.
right? Luke Skywalker tried to, he abandoned the Force and abandoned the Republic order, all held together by Princess Leia, but he almost killed his nephew.
Yeah.
And I went on and on just talking about how there was no strong male figures. I don't have a problem with strong female figures, but
Mhm.
when it's at the expense of men, that's what I
Right.
find to be a significant issue. And I think maybe there's some Star Wars since that time that have balanced things a little bit more, but
Mhm.
the pushing of female leads and female characters is very obvious to a male fan. Now, you could say, well, that's how women have always felt. It's like, where are all the women as leads, right? But I don't know. It just feels like it's a strong compensation. Here's another quote
Yeah.
by her. I think a lot of women who step into the Star Wars struggle with toxic fandom a bit more. By the way, no one's saying that toxic fans who are criticizing and through social media at criticizing and putting down the female actresses. Like, no one's saying that toxicity is okay. That's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the reason why female characters in Star Wars haven't worked.
Right.
It's just poor acting or poor storytelling or poor scripts or poor, just dialogue. But here's the quote, which people are upset about. I think a lot of women who step into the Star Wars struggle with toxic fandom attacks a bit more. I think a lot of, sorry, let me rephrase that. I think a lot of the women who step into Star Wars struggle with toxic fandom attacks a bit more. Because of the fan base being so male dominated, they sometimes get attacked in ways that can be quite personal. So it's saying because men are the fans of this, women get toxicity. It's like assuming, it's like this implicit assumption that men are toxic.
Right.
It's not said explicitly, but like all men, because men like this franchise, that's why women can't be strong characters that people like.
There's way more nuance to all of this. Yeah, like it's way, yeah.
Yes. Operating within these giant franchises now with social media and the level of expectation, it's terrifying for the actresses. Some of the fans push back and say like the lackluster scripts and the lack of talented actresses is the real reason. This is ridiculous. You know what they point to above all else? One of the strongest female characters in film history, Princess Leia.
Yeah.
Nobody had a problem with Princess Leia. I mean, it was a little problematic when they put her in a bikini in Return of the Jedi. That was a little problem. But pretty much all the way through, strong woman. No one had a problem with her because she was very well written.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do you are you attracted to the sort of female warrior archetype?
It's a great question. I figure the conversation might head that direction. And I think in some ways, yes. But like when I think about like middle school me and why I loved Star Wars, I do love the adventure of it all. Like we just talked about how I like to travel. Like I like, new things, exciting things. But it's the relationships. Like I'm such a woman that like the relationality of like what was happening between Leia and Han Solo and Luke and Darth Vader and Luke, like all of this was like, and it was like about the underdogs, like the Rebel Alliance. Sure. It was like, oh my gosh, yes. Like
you can't stand authority.
What?
You can't stand authority.
Who said I can't stand authority?
Just easy.
But that's a good thing for me to reflect on for sure. But I think that I just liked like the community of it. I think I liked the complementarity. I think was attractive to me. Like I think I felt like a connection of like, I wanted to be like Princess Leia, but I didn't feel
you did want to be like her.
I mean, I haven't thought about it in a while, but I mean, there are qualities of Princess Leia that I think are admirable. Like she was persistent, strong, she persevered. Like there's a lot.
She was virtuous in relation to the rogue Han Solo, right?
Yes. Yeah. I liked Leia. I think like, what we're looking at is like, why does it have to be this like up and down, one's better than the other?
Well, I think what was such a tragedy, especially regarding like Han Solo, like if you think about the love affair between Princess Leia and Han Solo is she couldn't sort of come over to fully embrace who he was until he let go of his selfishness and ego and became altruistic.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the story arc of their love story, because she did like he had masculine strength and competency, which she was attracted to, but she couldn't go all the way with him until he became a good man.
Right.
Right. And that love story takes place over 3 films. And it's beautiful. And then when the next film comes out, like I said, he has reverted to his selfish, roguish ways and shirks responsibility. And it's like, you just negated the whole point. Right. And similar to Luke Skywalker, and Luke Skywalker learning how to trust things from a spiritual perspective and letting go of his own psychology and his own kind of like immaturity and desire for adventure to sort of trust in the Force and trust in the spiritual dimension of things. And then he just completely rejects the Force.
Yeah.
I understand you have to tell new stories, but, and maybe they were trying to play off nostalgia, I guess, but make new characters. Don't ruin the old, don't ruin the old characters, masculine or feminine alike. Make new characters.
I agree. But you have you have a long and loving history of Star Wars yourself. Like
Deeply,
Star Wars
yes.
is like, what'd you say?
Yeah, deeply. Yeah, I love Star
Deeply,
Wars.
right? So like for you, like I think you've thought about this more deeply than I have, because I think for you, you talk about like this is something that really like played a big part in your development spiritually, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. When I was a kid, when I was confronted with some of these masculine characters, which sort of flipped masculinity on its head, like the older characters. So Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, where they essentially were playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, right? So the first time, like especially when you're a boy and you're filled with testosterone and you're trying to compete with other people and win, and you're interested in who the best fighter is and who the strongest is, and Darth Vader is terrifying, and then he fights Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan Kenobi just drops his lightsaber and says, "If you kill me, I'll be more powerful than you could possibly imagine." That blew my mind as a little kid. Like there's something that transcends the material universe. And the second one, Yoda's sort of the same thing. You're expecting to find this great Jedi. You don't know who it is yet. And you find this little creature who's the most powerful there is, but is hiding, is hidden, and is humble. And I think, as men, there's the natural desire for competency in our lives, and our identity can be wrapped up in that. But the reality is, like, once we hit 25, it all starts declining. All our competencies start declining. So what can we try and pursue that's in line with masculinity? And it's things like wisdom and spiritual wisdom, in which we could feel good about ourselves. So yeah, that set me on a trajectory to be open to the spiritual life when I was a child. So for that reason, it's deeply important to me. That's the reason why I'd want to talk about it today. I'm also very interested in just how art affects people. And in a world, let's go back to politics for a moment. In a world where it's very difficult to find leaders, to find people who we can follow, then oftentimes we return to archetypal characters or figures in fiction and the models that they provide for us. And so perhaps they're not all realistic. Perhaps, Aragorn, the Aragorn of Lord of the Rings, isn't a real person, but when Aragorn represents an ideal. And you have the Game of Thrones series, which is saying, well, Aragorn's not realistic, so let's make a more realistic anti-hero in our fantasy world. But like, still, the desire for the Aragorn, basically Christ archetype, prevails. And characters like that, which exhibit virtue and goodness and courage and leadership, I think sometimes that can help lead us through personal development when we have no models or examples otherwise. Do you look to women in that same way? Do you look for like models of femininity or womanhood in the popular culture, or anything beyond your personal life or in fiction?
Fiction, that's a really great question. I'm sure. I think this is interesting. So I don't read a lot of fiction, and I don't watch a lot of it. I love it when I do, but it's hard for me to like get motivated to. But when I do, I love it. And like, this is like 10 years ago now, but Harry Potter was something that I read for the first time in like my late 20s. And I was like, because I was
late to the party.
I was told. I was also like, I didn't want to be into it when everybody else was into it, because it felt like I just wasn't into that. So, but I was in Mozambique, and like in a rural area, not with anybody else who's from America. And so my friend mailed me the first 3 books, because I was like, brought all of these like deep, heavy spiritual books that I wanted to read. And I was like, I can't even think straight. So she was like, read Harry Potter.
Light. I need an escape. I need something light. Yeah.
Yes. And I think the character development is so strong. And like, so the books came out roughly about the same time. Like I'm like about the same age as the characters, were.
Okay.
So like, not that I was the same age while reading it, but could connect because of like, I knew I was the same age as they were being written. And characters like Hermione and Ginny Weasley, I think, I'm trying to think if they're women like that. I don't know. See, here's the thing. Like, I think, I'm thinking about my own psychology now, and thinking about how I think, oh man, this is hard. I don't know that I've really looked to female characters
for models.
But I'm thinking of the possibilities of like ways that I could, but I don't know that I have historically. Yeah. I think that I've appreciated strong female characters. And I think that like the adventurous, you know, like you were asking, like the warrior type, like I think that that's felt inspiring to me. But I think it felt confusing growing up as a Protestant, and like the messages I learned about what it was like, what it meant to be a woman, and like I think it was all very confusing for me. And I think I have much more clarity as a Catholic.
Yeah.
So I didn't really answer your question. I don't think I have.
You don't have a lot of models like that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, my big takeaway is I'm fine with leaders, female leaders and female characters. I think they're great. I think they're really important. And I can kind of feel the pang of feeling less represented now. Whereas that's what women and African Americans have felt, and people of different ethnic minorities have felt. So I get it. I just wish that and Star Wars in particular is generally multicultural by nature.
Yeah.
I mean it's multiracial in the full sense of race, like aliens.
Yeah.
Right. So I get the spirit of that, but I just can't help but feel that it's not balanced enough, and that there's such a push in favor of silencing the male virtuous figure more so than lifting up the female figure.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, maybe you should do that. Maybe you should
write something.
Yeah.
Sure.
What would
In all
you
my
write?
free time. I don't. That's a topic for another time.
But you like
Hannah. I like to write. I don't know if I don't think Dr. Greg would let me write.
No.
Take the time to write anything right now. I also have young kids. Maybe in retirement I'll write something.
Okay.
Hannah Wilson says, I wonder what Princess Leia thinks about bears. Do you get this reference? This is funny. This is a funny statement. So a few weeks ago, we talked about a story where women on TikTok were asked if they were. We have a woman with us today. Let's ask you, if you were alone in the woods, which would you rather see, a bear or a man?
Oh man, I didn't know about this trend on TikTok. I would rather see a man. Yeah, I would rather.
You'd rather see a man.
Yeah,
that's great. That's great. That's really healthy. Most women, at least on TikTok, the women of TikTok, would rather see a bear. That's how terrified and women are of men, and the perceptions of men have just lowered to such a point that they're more dangerous than a bear. It's pretty upsetting. But what would Princess Leia think about bears? I mean, I don't think Princess Leia is scared of bears or men. I mean, she looked into the eyes of Darth Vader and General Moff Tarkin and told them where they could stick their lightsabers, you know?
He totally did.
Katarina Keats says, as a character to look up to as a woman is Jane from Pride and Prejudice. Do you like Pride and Prejudice?
I have to admit, I have not read Pride and Prejudice. I think I may have seen one of the movies, so I can't even answer that.
I'm going to tell my wife, Teresa, on you for that one, because that's one of her favorites.
But now that I think about it, like Anne of Green Gables was something I grew up on, and like she's a strong female character, and like her whole story is about with Gilbert Blythe, like she was so independent, and like, you know, she was adopted, and she had this, you know, like adopted mother that was like, you know, lived with her brother, never got married, and like she grew to be able to trust Gilbert Blythe and let herself, you know, be in relationship with a man.
And that's a model. That's a model for you.
I think so.
Yeah, I think I'm like on a large cultural level, like that's the message, right? All of us needing to learn how to trust the opposite gender, you know, because we're all hurt, right? We're all hurt in our history. Nobody has perfect parents, you know. We're probably hurt in our middle school experience. Yeah, there's always something that we need to overcome and heal from.
Yeah.
And it becomes a question of trusting something new, even though we've been hurt in the past.
And your whole thing is like the media is playing a part in it's well, what do you think? It's reflective probably of real wounds interpersonally, and then it's perpetuating them is what I'm
saying. I mean, certainly. I mean, like feminism has a point, right? Like men have historically mistreated women. There have, like, I do not reduce all of the problems of society to patriarchal issues, right? Which, you know, if you accept the premise that everything is based on power dynamics, then the only thing you're going to pursue is power. So I reject that.
Mhm.
And I also reject the idea that because there is power, I am going to be hurt by that power.
Mm.
I think we long for nothing more than to be loved with tenderness from those in a position of power,
Mhm.
right? Like that's the father that we all want. That's the heavenly father, right? To have all that power and to be able to control it to a point where there's tenderness and we can meet us in our childlikeness or in our femininity in a way that's not frightening or terrifying, but that we can trust in it and rely on it.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, men have historically abused the power that they've had. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about how much power, like, rejects the idea of how much power men actually had when you think about the role of women. But that's, again, a conversation for another time. You can look up Jordan Peterson's critique of patriarchal ideologies, anti-patriarchal ideologies. But my whole point, though, is even if it's true that men have abused power, that does not mean all men are bad,
No.
or that they need to be silenced, or that they can't have power,
Yeah.
or that they need to be erased from Hollywood or erased
Right.
from storytelling,
Mhm.
right? Like it's too much of a pendulum swing for me. And
Yeah.
moderation is everything. You want to not swing to one extreme or another. I was talking to someone today that said there's a lot of young Catholics that are anti John Paul II,
This is
ultra
so shocking to me.
ultra trad, ultra conservative Catholics that are like St. John Paul II is too feminine.
Oh
It's
man.
it's a reaction, right? It's an
Yes.
overcompensation. I mean, when John Paul came on the scene with Theology of the Body, it was such a relief to have a view of sexuality that allowed it to be like sublimated and honored in its proper place, within a Catholic vision, right? It was
Yeah.
like groundbreaking for people, because
Mhm.
before that it was such a mess. And now we have people growing up with that, and they're like, meh, theology of the body, not that big of a deal. But you know what is a big deal? Like like parenting permissive parenting that creates narcissistic
Yeah.
children and
Mhm.
feminization of children. So we
Yeah.
need the Andrew Tate types of, like, what do they call it? Mono masculine.
Mhm.
It's monosphere or something like that. This whole movement of like ultra trad conservative, like misogynistic masculinity.
Right. It's just the extremes. Whenever we're in the extremes,
Yes.
right, there's something
Ex-
problematic going on.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we have a human tendency to shift to one pole or the other and not
Right.
be able to take what is good from each side, but block out what is
Yeah.
bad. Did you ever see
Which is
Happy Gilmore?
understandable, right? There's something in us that like it feels safer in some way to have that like over the line experience, to have that certainty. We don't like the gray space is hard, but I think like
It is.
as Catholics, we're called to live in the tension. Like we're called that's part of being Catholic.
That's right. And it's not going to be resolved here, not in this life.
No, no, not at
So,
all.
somebody's shouting out what a great mentor you are.
I think she
Stephanie,
might be
awesome
Anna Green
mentor.
Gables.
Oh, Anne of Green Gables is an
I
awesome
think that might
mentor.
be what she means.
Oh, that's cool. You should write a book on that.
Maybe I will.
Okay, Catherine says culture and especially the education system, and yes, movies and stories can shape powerfully opposite gender distrust as well. That's true, even without a real wounding, and this can be a preconceived bias. Yeah, I think we want to think about what foundational experiences are that makes one susceptible to that type of external influence.
Mhm.
I think there's a risk of us blaming culture, blaming movies, blaming politics for the entirety of formation for our youth, and that's unfair.
Mhm.
Certain upbringings make us susceptible to that influence, and
Yeah.
others don't. Others might make us resistant to it, and so the family system plays a key role here. You think of soldiers, right? Soldiers experience the same. Two given soldiers might experience the same war.
Mhm.
One has PTSD, one doesn't.
Right.
Why?
Right.
It's the same war. No one's
Mhm.
disagreeing that war is terrible. It's
Yeah.
awful. But how that's filtered through their own psychology is the key question. And where is
Mhm.
that formed and developed? From the original foundation in their family system,
Right.
which teaches them resilience or not. So
Mhm.
yes, I agree with what Catherine's saying here. Like the external, the education system, the
Mhm.
culture can influence. But I mean, the best thing we can do, I mean, of course we want to to push back on a cultural level as much as we can, which is in some ways what this show is about. But it's like Mother Teresa says, like, the best way to affect change is to go home and love your children.
Yeah.
It's like at the level of the family and the formation and helping them and communicate, like having healthy communication with children
Yeah.
to help them make sense of what's happening in the world. Like that makes all the difference, because you can't keep the world out forever.
No. Mm-mm.
You
No.
can't put your kids in a bubble. They'll find their way out of your bubble. They'll dig underground. They'll pop a hole in it. They'll do whatever they can. They're going to experience the world. So all you can do as a parent, which is terrifying, is prepare them for it and trust in God.
And like, as someone who knows your kids, you know, like your kids get nuance, you know, like they're able, like, you know, like you're explaining things to them at a developmentally appropriate level, but they're able to be like, because I think I made a joke to Ben, who's 5. I was like he was like joking around. He was like telling a secret, and I was like, secrets aren't fun. And he was like, well, it depends. And I was like, that is such a Violette response. I was so impressed.
That's funny. Yeah, it's true. Other thoughts on Star Wars and culture and feminine heroes and other mentors?
I mean, it is, here's the thing, this is not fictional, but it is the feast day of the Visitation. So it is Our Lady's feast day. 2 very important women, Elizabeth and Our Lady. Yeah, and I think since becoming Catholic, I think I've had such corrective emotional experiences, and, you know, our field's language of just complementarity in general. You know, I think that St. Joseph, you know, like, I think I've come to understand the masculine genius so much more, and my own feminine genius. And I don't feel devalued. If anything, I feel built up. And I think that, like, it's often a misunderstanding of Catholicism, like that, you know, Mary, you know, like it gets, there's so many different misunderstandings, but like, no, it is such a gift, you know, that like, no, we both have this like tremendous inestimable value, and we don't need to diminish one another.
Yeah. Some of the great theologians talk about the Marian dimension of the church, and the femininity in relation to God's sort of masculinity, in terms of God initiating, God creating, redeeming, sanctifying, and then the church or the soul being responsive to that, responding to that, and the gift of receptivity that is taught to us by, above all else, a woman.
Right.
Yeah. There's this, the Pope on 60 Minutes was just talking about how women, the church cannot change the teaching around whether or not women can be ordained deacons or priests. And you can look at that from a certain angle and say, well, the church is misogynistic, or the church is oppressive in terms of women. Like, the Blessed Mother is honored above all creatures. Yeah. She is the model for all of us in terms of what we are to become in relation to God. So
yeah,
I think we got crisis going on outside your house. I hear sirens.
You can hear that. I know. I saw you reacted. I think it's passed.
I was like, can I mute her? No, I can't mute her.
What did you say?
I can only mute myself. I said, can I mute her? I can only mute myself over here. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I mean, like, bringing it home with Our Lady is really important. So today on this feast day, we have to entrust to her intercession this election.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Yeah. Joe
Biden, who is Catholic.
This is true.
This drives me nuts about Joe Biden being pro-choice and being Catholic. And Kathleen Kennedy, Star Wars franchise. At least we have hope for Lord of the Rings, which still, I think still is Catholic in identity, although Star Wars not so much anymore. It's lost its monotheism for the most part. So Steph, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Great